Hey folks. My name is Michet. I'm a writer and editor who works on indie games at night and League of Legends during the day. My most recent project was localization writing on Pathologic 2, indie horror game about dying of the plague on the Russian steppe. Today though I'm talking about the Nemi ships. They haunted a lake for centuries, then they turned fascist, and then they died. So it's a classic horror story. In the 1400s in central Italy, fishermen near Lake Nemi whispered they whispered about some mysterious wrecks hidden in the lake. Sometimes they threw down a hook and pulled up something weird. Everyone knew that the Romans had left something in the lake, but nobody was quite sure what. In the 1440s, the local Catholic cardinal decided to figure it out. He threw some hooks down into the water and peeled up boards covered in lead, but they couldn't really figure out what was hidden down there. So in the 1500s, a guy showed up at the lake with a diving bell. He went down in the lake and he found wood, but also bricks, marble, metal, not ship stuff. So he was wondering, is this a boat or a house or a temple? I would have been fascinated by that mystery. Instead, Mr. Diving Bell turned all the wood he found into commemorative walking sticks, sold them, and everybody just gave up investigating this lake for 200 years. Nobody went down there, nobody looked at that shit. Meanwhile, scholars are reading ancient Roman records that claimed the emperors owned some big-ass ships that were over 200 feet long, or 5 times the length of this room. I counted. Historians thought this is just an exaggeration. The Romans just wrote this to seem cool. But people are starting to think about Lake Nemi again. Some guy builds a giant floating platform to pull the stuff out of the lake, but his cables snap. So he goes out to get better cables, and when he comes back, the locals have disassembled his big platform to make wine barrels. So he gives up. Nobody cares enough to solve this mystery. Finally, in 1897, someone decides to actually take a look at this fucking lake, and inside it, they find 2 giant ships that are almost 250 feet long. They find, exactly what the Romans said they made. They find a rudder and an anchor down there. But bad news, they try to sell them to the government, but the government doesn't want them, so the researcher who found them throws them all out and doesn't even write about any of it. Okay, so it starts to look like the only way to get the boats out of the lake is to drain the lake. And the first person who has enough power and money to drain the lake is Mussolini, the fascist leader of the war. So they start draining the lake. The water drops 16 feet and the first boat starts to emerge. They pull it out. Let's just look at this fucking boat. It's wild. This boat is huge. It has a tiny palace built on top of it. It is most accurately described as a pleasure barge. This is Emperor Caligula's pleasure barge. He did orgies on this. The second ship appears when the water has gone down 66 feet. That's 6 stories. And as the weight of the water lifts, the lake starts exploding. All the mud held down by the water starts fountaining up and wrecking the boat. The lake is literally attacking Mussolini's archaeologists. 17 million cubic feet of mud comes rocketing out, and they just have to stop working on it. The lake fills back up again, and it takes 5 years for them to come back and re-drain the lake and finally get the boat out. So now they got both boats, and they're fucking incredible. They had plumbing, they had toilets, they had marble buildings. They had rotating statues in the garden. There's a garden on the boat. Using a ball-bearing technology which scholars had previously assumed Leonardo da Vinci had invented. These were party boats just for people to get drunk on. 2,000 years ago, people were making boats with plumbing for fun. They showed us that the Romans had a lot of technology we didn't previously want to believe that they had. And from Mussolini's perspective, they showed the world that he and fascism were inheriting the power of the Romans. This is really a story about state power. Before him, there wasn't a state interest in excavating these boats. But to Mussolini, digging up Italy's history looked like a cool investment, even if it took 5 years and the lake exploded. He put them in a museum to show off and say, look what fascism can do. Actually, what fascism did is it killed the boats. During World War II, the German army camped here, and when they retreated, somehow the boats caught on fire and burned to the ground. They literally don't exist anymore. These ships would be fine today if Mussolini hadn't dug them up. There is no moral imperative to dig up the past. We don't have to do it. It's not inherently necessary or even good. We just do it because we want to. Sometimes we dig up the past to learn about it, but sometimes connecting with the past only becomes a good investment when it serves power. Throughout most of history, the people who investigated these boats didn't have the technology to raise them, but it does begin to feel like the mystery should have unfolded faster in the late 1800s. The reason it didn't is there wasn't a state power interested in using these boats to hype itself up. And getting the boats up was so complex, only a dictator could order it done. Sometimes it pays to think about when and why and how a historical mystery unfolds. When we choose to unfold it, when we choose to care, and why, and whether our care is really as noble as we think. Thanks.